Hard Reuben. Oh my God.
Hello, headbangers and onlookers, and welcome to Hard Reuben's Force-Fed Cafe, episode number 4. This episode, I got to have a chat with one of my favorite people in the world, Topon Doss. Topon is the founder, writer, guitar player, and producer of two-time Juno-nominated Canadian metal pioneers, Fuck the Facts. Topon's a guy I consider more than a friend. This guy's like family. Of course, time and circumstance have put a world of distance and experience between us, but I continue to keenly pay attention to whatever he's up to, from his main band, Fuck the Facts, to any of his various side projects. There was a time that I had hoped that Topon would be able to join me as the co-host of this podcast, hearkening back to our younger days when we thought we ruled the metal airways. But alas, his business and family commitments just made that unattainable. And that's okay. Whatever Topon gets up to, you know it's going to be interesting, fresh, and challenging to whatever your preconceived notions might be. Luckily, Topon and I were able to connect again for this chat. Let's get to it.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how you doing?
Good, man. I was at the dollar store with my daughter and her friend.
Well, that's good times.
Yeah, and they're buying a treat.
I'm pretty excited about our chat, actually, because you and I have been talking about for a long time about this idea that I had to revive Force-Fed as a podcast. And these things sometimes take a long time to germinate, as you know.
Oh, yeah, I know.
When you plant the seed. So I'm finally doing it. I'm ready. And
that's cool, man.
I'm really glad that you are joining me for this episode.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing. I mean, you and I go way back, so I'd be pretty happy to go back just as far as we know each other. I mean, I started Force-Fed back in '92, and it wasn't long after that I had your brother join me, and then you came on board, and that was the team.
Yeah. I remember. I didn't even remember that it was 92. I'm really bad with dates.
Yeah. Well, I think I did it for about 8 months on my own, and then I was like, this is boring doing it by myself. So I pulled in your brother, and then he's like, you know who should do this? Topon. So
yeah. And then I got stuck there for like 8 years or something.
Is that how you felt? Stuck?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I left way too late.
Yeah.
But that seems to be like a common thing with me. I always get stuck in places for way too long, because it was definitely like a few years that I should have probably stopped.
Yeah. These things happen. You have to do them while they're fun and then move on when they're not, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. You guys have your money?
Yep, I got my money.
Just about done here.
No worries. So let's talk a little bit about, so you did Force-Fed for a while after I bailed, and a good long while, and started up Fuck the Facts in '98, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just had a 20-year anniversary.
Yeah. Here, hold on one sec.
Sure. All right. This is a great opportunity for us to take a little bit of a break and hear from our sponsor. Hey gang, you feeling sluggish, trying to find some energy for the gym, or wishing you could shed a few pounds and are struggling to find just the thing to help you? Then check out High on Life Superfoods. High on Life is the leading provider of hemp-based, nutrient-rich supplements intended to instill optimal health to those who wish to perform at the next level. Listen, I'm not just talking here. I use High on Life products myself. LIT is an amazing hemp-based, vegan, raw food blend that helps reset your body's nutrient balance and kickstarts your metabolism to get you going through the day. Use it as a shake, in a smoothie, or try my favorite. Mix it up with some cold coconut milk and cocoa, and voila, LIT ice cream. Do your body a favor, everyone. Go to highonlifesuperfoods.com and enter the code ForceFed10 on checkout to receive 10% off your order. But don't just listen to me. High on Life is used by some of your favorite bands: Suffocation, Trivium, Dark Angel, Testament, Body Count, and many more. These guys know what it means to need to keep up their metal pace. Try it and you will see the difference. I have. highonlifesuperfoods.com. Get it.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, good.
Now.
It gave me just the right amount of time to rewatch The Making of Disgorge Mexico.
Oh, nice.
It was hilarious. I forgot about that.
That was fun.
Yeah, you expect me on all the time? Like funny shit? Oh, good stuff. I want to do a little bit of a deep dive with you, Topon, because it's important to me. I mean, you were there for the force-fed years. You were like you carried it for so long, and it's it's such an important thing for me to bring it back and you know, give it some honor, and so a lot of what I'm doing is obviously I'm reaching back to some folks that we talked to back in the day, and just really trying to reconnect with some of the bands that we interviewed at the time and see where they're at. Some of them don't exist anymore. Some of them are still doing stuff, and I really wanted to do a little bit of that while, you know, focusing on some new music and some bands that are known and popular, and some that are still, you know, they're doing it yourself all the way up to the top and getting there, right? And so I think I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the history of Fuck the Facts with you, and sort of get a little bit of, you know, you and I used to talk about music all the time, but just get a little bit of a sense for your own sort of development as a musician. I mean, you were a bass player when I met you.
Yeah, I remember.
I hope so.
Is that where you want to start?
Yeah, let's start that. Like we can go all the way back to your we can go back to Fourth Dimension. We can talk about Troglodyte in the Basement if you want, you and your brother, and
yeah. Well, so the very beginning is my brother. Let me see, actually. You know what? No, the very, very beginning of my interest in music is, I think, when I got And Justice for All on cassette from my brother. I don't think I was playing music yet, but he gave me that cassette, and I'm pretty sure he gave me other cassettes, but for some reason that was the one that really grabbed me and kind of like made me realize that, you know, I had a passion for music, or at least a passion for this band Metallica, because I had music before in my house, you know, but I never paid much attention to it more than your average person until that point. And then, you know, Emmett was there, like, you know, who was a guy I went to school with forever, and he was a drummer. So we kind of like, you know, we kind of started jamming together. Like my brother gave me my first bass because he played bass in a band at a time, like the Final Solution days. So yeah, I got a bass from him, and I started jamming with Emmett, and I started doing concerts at Emmett's church with his dad. His dad would play acoustic guitar and sing, and Emmett would drum, and I'd play bass. And on the side, me and Emmett would start like our like metal band. We had like a lot of different names. I don't remember. I think like Sonic Angels was one of them. Even been a Christian band, which is weird, but yeah, that was it. And then I think it got, you know, as time went on, we started to, you know, get into death metal fairly quickly. So even like, you know, even though the Metallica thing kind of happened, in a way it was kind of, you know, the impact is huge, but it's very short-lived, because even once the Black Album came out, I was already kind of going elsewhere musically. And then we got really into death metal and started, you know, trying to have a death metal band. I think it was called Abattoir or Worm. Actually, that was probably two different band names we had. And yeah, we would just play like tons of street hockey every summer and have like death metal albums cranked on his porch while we were playing street hockey. And then we'd go in and jam. And that was kind of how it all started. And then when I joined Nihility, which I guess is like the first, I would say, like actual band that I joined, that kind of like, you know, ended me jamming with Emmett. And that, I guess, started the journey of me playing in bands. And then I just, you know, I played in a lot of different bands. I did Nihility. Nihility, yeah, and there was different incarnations of the Nihility, and then I kind of lost interest, and I ended up in Fourth Dimension, and I ended up in Corpus, which was a lot of fun. And then I think I ended up, from there, I went on to playing in lots of different death metal bands with Ron and Sean and my brother. Yeah, and my brother had, well, we had, we had a band called the Hate Fuckers. We had a band called Daedalus. Those are the first two I can remember. And then we got Bill, who was in Evolution Fail. We started bands with him as well. Recondite was one. Vile Intent was another death metal band we had. And like you said, Troglodyte was a little project I did with my brother and the guitarist from Fourth Dimension. But that was earlier, actually. That was before we started all these death metal bands. So that was it. And then kind of, I guess Recondite was probably the last death metal band that I played in before I started Fuck the Facts. And I actually got the vocalist from Recondite, who had just started playing drums, like literally like that month, to be the first drummer for Fuck the Facts. And the idea was just like, we just, my whole thing was just like, I just wanted to do something. I kind of felt like I was getting really stuck in a lot of, basement bands where we were jamming 4 times a week, but we weren't really doing anything. We were just kind of talking about all the stuff we were going to do. And I just really wanted to play more shows. I wanted to put out more releases and, tour and do all these things that I'd see. And this is actually, it's funny you get back to the force fed thing, but a huge part of me changing. Well, actually, I go even further. When I started the show with you, I always remember because you're the one that kind of almost turned me on to that music in a lot of ways. I remember you playing Brutal Truth, Walking Corpse, and I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like like that was like a life-changing moment for me hearing that. And also, after you were gone, there was a punk show before Force Fed. And that guy was a super rad dude, and he would basically trade 7 inches with me for, like shitty fucking tapes that I'd be doing. And he like turned me into like all the real more kind of like underground grindcore that I got into, like bands like Plutocracy and Agents of Satan and like, all that kind of like, I guess like California kind of like power violence stuff that was happening. And Dystopia was a big one that he turned me on to, Hell Nation. And that music just kind of like, I don't know, the music really spoke to me, but I think almost what spoke to me more was just like, these are dudes just like me. They're just like, shitty kids, and they're putting out records and thit's doing this stuff, and it's nothing pristine. It wasn't like all this stuff that was on Roadrunner, and it wasn't all the death metal bands that were on these glossy magazines and stuff. It's like, these are just fucking like, kids like me doing it. And that really, I think, got, the wheels turning in my head with how Fuck the Facts was going to go. And just kind of like, it kind of probably helped me gain confidence before I was like remotely good enough, because I couldn't really do any of the stuff I wanted to do, but I kind of saw these other people doing it in a way, I guess was, lo-fi enough that I'm like, I can do that. So I spent like, at least a year or two putting out like really horrible recordings that just, but I did it, and over time I think it got better. And by the time, I really feel like before Fuck the Facts became a band, which was in 2001, so the whole year of 2000 was when I did like Discoing the Dead, and I did a bunch of split tapes that I was all like really proud of. So I kind of developed the sound, which is really cool. But then when I started the band in 2001, when we were a full band again, it was almost in a way going back to zero, because I'd gotten, I was happy with what I was doing, but now I had to like change everything. Now I was playing with a real drummer. I was playing with other musicians. I wasn't doing vocals anymore. It was really different. And like, the first recording with the band is basically Mullet Fever, which doesn't sound, like anything like before or after.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of a standalone.
I don't know. Yeah, but I'm actually really stoked on that recording. I don't know, like I look back at a lot of the stuff that we've done, and there's some that I'm like prouder than others, and there's some that I'm like, I wish I could go back and redo this, or this was a bit different and that. And there's definitely that with that release, but there's something about that, the way that I thought back then and the way I approached music with really just no regard for feeling feeling like I needed to belong to just one style of music or one scene or anything. Like on Mullet Fever, there's like literally like rap songs because our vocalist at the time was really into rap, and I was like, really like rap. Hey, let's just do rap, and he embraced that idea. And I don't know, someone was mentioned it to me not even that long ago, where they brought it up, and they're like, "What the fuck would you do that?" Like someone that listened to the old stuff, and they were actually like kind of like irritated by that idea that we would do something
New grind.
something that kind of that's silly. And like the grindcore tag that always kind of like follows us around, and like I'm to blame for that because I throw it around loosely as well. It's well like that, like it's very loose, because even now the stuff we do is probably closer to being metal, maybe even closer to even death metal in a way, than it is like your typical grindcore band. But yeah, like when I look back at Mullet Fever and just the way I did things back then, even though it wasn't perfect, I'm really proud of that kind of approach. And that was a really difficult thing when I was in a lot of bands before. It was like, all right, we got this death metal band. Oh, but I want to do something a little bit thrashier. Okay, well, let's start like, another kind of thrash sort of band. I sort of wanted to escape that and just kind of be able to do whatever I felt like doing and whatever the people in my band felt like doing, even though like rap was never an influence of mine. Like I remember listening to Public Enemy when I was a kid and things like that, but it was never a style of music that grabbed me. But I was always open to trying whatever anyone brought to the table, and I think it made for some really interesting music. And that's something that I over the years it got harder to kind of like find that same, I don't know, like naiveness or whatever. When you're young, like it's really different when you're young and you don't have the experience and you don't really know what you're doing and you don't have the attention of people. It's a lot easier to kind of just do whatever. Whereas time goes on, you start to like, maybe look at things differently, and you maybe start to overanalyze things. You start to see, oh man, now people are paying attention to what I do, and it can affect you in weird ways. So I'm always trying to like look back at those days, and even if it's like I don't want to recreate that music necessarily, but I want to like grab onto that feeling I had like 15 years ago that made it exciting to make music.
I was reading while I was getting ready for our conversation, Topon. I was just checking out your Bandcamp page just to have a look at what people were saying. This one guy, Kyle Anderson, says that Fuck the Facts is always evolving their sound, never putting out the same release twice. One of the best Canadian, or anywhere for that matter, grind bands out there. I think that's probably one of the it's a succinct and accurate assessment of what you've been doing with Fuck the Facts.
Yeah, it's cool. Like it's awesome to hear when people really, when people enjoy what you're doing and they grasp onto what you're doing. And yeah, like everyone loves that. And if you're making music and you're putting it out there to the public, it's because you want people to pay attention. No matter what you're trying to say, no matter what image you might be putting on or say that you don't care, the moment you kind of put it out to the public, you do care. And everyone likes to be told that they're good, and people don't enjoy being told that they suck.
Unless you're Primus.
Yeah, that's a different kind of suck. But like I remember, like I never really paid. I didn't have the internet for ages. Like when I started the band, it was all tape trading through the mail. It was all flyers. I had friends that had the internet when it was, but like I never had one myself. At some point I had to go to like my parents' house to maybe use a computer. But I remember as it kind of evolved, even people, like friends of mine, they'd be like, oh, there's this thing on the internet about Fuck the Facts. I'm like, oh wow, that's so cool. There's like a message board and someone's writing something about this like stuff I'm doing. That's so cool. And then I remember when we signed to Relapse, that kind of changed everything, because then I was like paying attention, but then I was like, oh man, people are really mean. That's when I first started to witness like people saying kind of like, negative stuff about the band and kind of like, just like mean shit. And at that point on, I was like, I think I'm good not really reading anything. So, it's been years. I'd never really search out and try and see what people are saying about the band. Obviously, if people send us reviews and stuff, I'll always read them and check them out. But I'm never kind of like scouring the message boards. I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, to see what
I think
anyone
it's called
is
Facebook.
saying. Yeah. So I never scour, any of that stuff anymore to see what might be happening. And I kind of prefer it in that way. I find even from like that really nice like positive thing that you read back, and then like the polar opposite of like the really negative thing. There's nothing to really for me to gain for the music that I want to write or what I'm going to put out by reading either of those things. Of course, I love it that guy enjoys the music and feels great about it, but it's not going to change the way that I'm going to approach doing things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Like
you want music to influence you, not people, right?
Yeah, and you say it to, like, I've said that to people all the time. It's like, no matter what you do in life, you're never going to make everyone happy, So that's an impossible goal. You can only make yourself happy. And I find even, as much as like we'll put something out and there's a group of people that are going to hate it regardless if they heard it. There's another group of people that are going to love it regardless if they heard it. You know what I mean? Like people get like emotional attachments to bands in that way, and I know it's happened with us, and it's great, but I don't want it to kind of like distort the way I think about stuff. So I put out albums that I think sound very bad, and I wish I could change stuff. And there's things I'm always very critical of myself, and I like to think as a band we're critical of ourselves, and we don't get caught up in like when people it's the same as like when you play a show. And because like now I work as a live sound guy, so I see a million shows all the time, and every band gets told that they're awesome all the time. So it's kind of like, do you want to just take that and let it kind of like blind you from maybe what is not that great, or you kind of realize, what, we weren't very good tonight, and we got to be better, and then you work to improve yourself in that way.
Yeah, you need to accept the compliment without living in it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you don't want to be like, don't fucking compliment me. I know I suck. No, yeah. It's like,
I mean, from being on the fan side, I mean, you don't care if they've screwed something up, right? Like you're watching a band you like, you don't care that they didn't get the solo that they do, or they missed a beat here. You don't care, right? You care that you had fun, and so that's.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like people experience shows in very different ways. The kid that's like right up front in the mosh pit getting spit on is experiencing it very differently from me who's like way in the back, kind of just watching and maybe being a bit more critical in some ways. Funny enough, just last month I got asked to judge Wacken. Battle of the Bands thing. They have this contest and bands get to go and they get a chance to go play Wacken. But anyway, I was doing it with a bunch of other guys, and I realized like I kind of when I started saying what I thought, and I finished my sentence, the other guys were like, "Whoa, dude, that's a bit harsh." Like, this is supposed to be just for fun. Like, oh, I want it to be fun, but at the same time, I'm hoping I can kind of tell a band. I'm not going to tell a band they suck or anything like that, but I'm trying to give some sort of constructive thought into the show that I saw, especially since I see so many shows on a regular basis. And, out of 100 shows, there's maybe one or two in there that I'm like, wow, that's really impressive. And that's, I think, what every band should be striving for. I think, I guess you don't have to. Like, everyone has different ways of enjoying music and have different goals of what they're doing, but I feel like a band that's in some sort of battle of the bands and trying to like make it to the next level, you want to be striving to be awesome.
Yeah, and they should be open. Like they should be open to that advice or those pieces of subtle.
And and I wouldn't be doing anyone any favors if I didn't say something. It's the same thing. Like I work, also as, a producer and a recording engineer, and I work with bands. in that way. And I have to tell people, like, that's not good enough. You have to do it again, or we have to change something because this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing anyone any favors by saying, oh yeah, that's great. Like, I'm not their mom. Like, it's at the end of the day, I'm trying to help bands be, the best possible version of themselves and what they're doing and get the best out of them. And it's kind of not settling for something that's not working or not that great or could be better, and it's a different approach for every single band that I work with. But, I have bands tell me, like, oh, don't be shy. Like, tell us. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry. Like, I would be an asshole if I was sitting, like, next to you thinking, fuck, this guy sucks, and just smiling, while I'm, while you're paying me to be there. So, I try, and I really actually like working with young bands. I think if there's one thing that's kind of changed with me over time, and now as I've gotten older, and the bands that I see are, noticeably younger than me, are kind of in a different time, I enjoy working with them, and I enjoy kind of, trying to help them learn from stuff that, I did all the years, and, give my kind of input. And, not everything that I've been through is as relevant to nowadays as it was, but I still think there's the basics of what musicians are striving for, and the steps that should be taken to achieve those goals. I think in a genuine way, where it's not just about, like, okay, we got like this many views on this video or this many likes on Facebook. I think that stuff is really, I'm not saying that stuff is all bad, but that's paper thin. Whereas, being an amazing live band, that is difficult. Like, I can tell you, it's very difficult. Like I said, like, I don't see 9 out of 10 bands are not amazing live. So to be that band, you will make an impact. And then it's making, from having that and then getting to a point where you have the opportunities to be in front of an audience, and then making those next steps. Mm-hmm. And I just, for myself, I just think, like, you just should want to be good. From my point of view, that's obviously not from everyone, but I think whether you're playing in front of 10 people or 10,000 people, I think you should want to be good, because it's just going to make you feel better, right?
Yeah, for sure. Let me take you back a little bit. So you've talked a little bit about being with Relapse, and then you jumped into doing recording, and I want to talk about both those things. But going back to the sort of early days of Fuck the Facts, you did a bunch of releases, first on your own and then with the original version of the band. But it was really around 2005 when you signed with Relapse Records that things started to sort of pick up. Is that, you started to get a little bit of traction?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think signing to Relapse changed things a lot. Like, we were getting, I think, more notice. And I think especially in, like, the Canadian scene, like, the kind of music that we played, say, like, you want to call it grindcore, kind of like really extreme music. At the time, there were not a lot of bands like us touring. It's not like it is now, where it's very common for bands to tour, and for that reason, it's gotten a lot more difficult. But when we started off, like, I remember, like, a lot of the shows we played, like, were crazy. They're almost crazier, like, in the very beginning, as some points, like, later on when the scene got kind of more saturated. But yeah, I think, when we signed to Relapse, that automatically, obviously, kind of, it almost, like, I think, legitimized what we were doing in a lot of people's eyes.
They were the big show back in that time, right? Like, they were the label that people wanted to be on in extreme music. So
yeah, well, I think for our kind of extreme, it was kind of as good as it was going to get. Like, I think if you were more, a death metal kind of, like, which is a bit more accessible, maybe. And also our name would always hold us back no matter what, right? So that's a difficult thing for, no label, like Roadrunner's not going to throw tons of money. Not back then. Now it's probably not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then it wasn't really going to happen. And, I loved Relapse. Like, back to our radio show days, like, I was super stoked on everything that was coming out of Relapse. And that, like, 90s era of Relapse is like, that still like sticks with me. If anything, like I wanted my band to just sound like that entire like catalog of 90s era Relapse, where it's kind of all over the place and super interesting. Like I still love listening to those old compilations. This isn't Relapse, but even I listened recently to the Grind Crusher E-Rake compilation. I was like, this is amazing. Like it's so all over the place, and it's so exciting.
I had all of my music stolen about long time ago now, but I lost all that 90s era stuff, that late 80s 90s stuff. Lost it all, and every once in a while I'm reminded of something that I used to have, and I just have a quiet moment and like, I wonder if I wonder if I can find that on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the good thing about the internet is you can most likely find all of that stuff now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was huge. Like signing to Relapse, we were actually in the studio recording Stigmata High Five, dealing with a separate label that was paying for the studio. That when Relapse contacted, I had to write to them and be like, hey, Relapse wants to sign us. Is it cool? Like, I'll pay you back the money and we can go. And the guy was really cool about it, obviously, and he didn't want to hold us back. So it worked out well. We got to put out 3 albums on Relapse, which is pretty crazy that they went even for a second one, let alone a third one. So
yeah, so you had a good what 5-year run with Relapse?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I think Die Miserable came out in 2010. Or no, 2011. Yeah, so 2006 to 2011. Yeah. So it was great, and it was. I'll admit it was a bit of a bummer that it didn't work out. But a lot of like the old staff are still my friends. Like I think it's changed a lot, the staff over the years. But I know whenever we go to Philly, like there's still a lot of the old Relapse people that are still really good friends. There was definitely part of me that was like hoping it would continue, but I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen for us.
Well, 3 albums is actually quite a bit with Relapse, isn't it, for a lot of bands? So
yeah.
What I'm trying to get to is we talked about the origins of Fuck the Facts, how you did it all on your own. It was all very do it yourself. You were talking about how much you enjoy working with younger bands, and that sort of do-it-yourself thing really it's kind of the way everybody has to do it now. I mean, there's not a lot of record deals for bands that want to make like what they want to make, right? So
yeah.
So
and
I remember when you and I were talking towards the end of your time with Relapse, and you started talking about your next steps personally, not just with the band, but personally. And that's when I first heard the idea for what would become Apartment 2.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So basically, it's a recording studio that I started. It's actually Apartment 2. It's the second apartment in my mom's house. But the beginning of the whole studio thing was basically when the band decided to record Die Miserable, which was our last album on Relapse. So basically we did Disgorge Mexico. We spent a lot of money. I think we spent $9,000 doing that album, which is a lot of money for us. And not all of that was covered by Relapse. So we really dug in and put in a bunch of our money to make sure that album happened the way it did. And when it got time to think about the next album, it was like, well, how about instead of us spending another $5,000 in the studio, let's take that money and invest in some gear and, start to think more long term about what we're going to do. So, I asked my mom if we could do it at her house. And we basically had the control room set up in like an old bedroom, and all the equipment was set up in my mom's laundry room where we had like everything set up. And we did actually, right before that, we did the Unnamed EP, which was kind of like the trial run of like, okay, we're going to record ourselves. So the idea was just record ourselves, and then I sent it to my friend Craig, who had recorded Disgorge Mexico, to mix, and then we get it mastered somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that was the plan with Die Miserable. So it was just like recorded ourselves. But man, we were so paranoid about like every little thing it was an insanely stressful month. And stuff looking back now, like I always think, we would do like 7 takes of the same like drum part, and we'd like listen back through all of them. They all sound the same, but we would just like drive ourselves nuts trying to see which one was the best. Like measuring every single little microphone, making sure nothing ever moved. And then if something did, it was just like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. What are we going to do? Yeah, it was just crazy. Whereas like now my approach is like, I'm just going to throw these mics up and hopefully it'll be okay. But at the time it was so insane that we drove ourselves nuts. And it's funny because I listened back to the album Die Miserable, and for the longest time I had it in my head that I didn't really like the album. But I think it's just because it brings back this kind of like anxiety, or I'm just like, oh, it like stresses me out to think about how we made that album, that I feel like I didn't like it. But then like I listened to it like a year or two ago, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is actually pretty cool. There's some good songs on here. Like, this is fun. But yeah, so that's basically how I started, but not with any intention of recording other bands. But what happened was we had just finished recording Die Miserable. I had friends of mine that played in a band called Bipigwan that were like, hey, like I'd recorded them at their own place just for fun, but they were like, hey, can we record? I'm like, oh, I got all this stuff. I'm ready to go. So I ended up recording them in my mom's laundry room. And then the drummer from that band was also in a band called Alaskan, who I ended up recording in there as well. And then the guitar player from Alaskan was in another band called Hamilton. And then the drummer in Alaskan was also in another hardcore band called Motivator. And it just basically kind of snowballed where I was just like, well, I guess I'm going to keep recording bands. And then I talked to my mom, because there was a separate apartment studio, which she had been using for her artwork, but she hadn't done artwork in years. And she basically let me take over that whole apartment, and I just kept recording bands. And, now this is 2010, so like, 9 years ago since it started. And it's just kind of like gotten busier and busier, to the point where now I even have someone else that works at the studio with me, just because I wasn't able to kind of keep up with the workload.
Well, that's pretty good. So
yeah,
You sound unsure.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a lot of those like kind of like good problems. They're just kind of I have so many kind of things on the go, like the studio, and now that the band is starting to kind of roll again. I also work for like managing a venue, and I do live sound, and I'm also kind of like getting a record label that we've been doing going. So I have all these things kind of going. It's just always finding the time to make it all work, which is sometimes why you text me. It takes me 2 days to get back to you.
That's all right. Let's go back to Die Miserable. So you put Die Miserable out. The recording is full of stress and anxiety for you because you're setting up your own studio, and then you're nominated for a Juno Award.
Yeah.
How the hell did that feel?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was a really cool feeling. It was the first time they had, like, I guess, created that category. Yeah, it's really cool. Like, there's nothing away. There's not like a ton of bands that could have fit into that category. Mm-hmm. It's not like we were competing with like the Nickelbacks and stuff like that, right? But yeah, it's cool whenever anyone notices, and like our good friends in Ken Mode are the ones that ended up winning that one, which was, I thought, really cool.
Yeah.
As well.
That was a great album. Actually, as well.
Yeah, both times, because we were nominated again for Desirable Rot.
Yeah. And
both times we were nominated, and I think it was the first one and the second one was in Ottawa. We were in Germany both times when we could have been there, which would have been cool, but these things happen.
Your last 2 albums nominated for Junos.
Yeah.
No pressure. No pressure.
No. Yeah. Well, I think the guys from Ken Mode, I actually saw them recently because they put out an album not long ago. They were here in September or something, and I went to go see them. And I don't even know if because you have to sign up, right? It's not just like the Junos go and find you. You
That's
have
right.
to like say, hey, I put out an album. You have to apply to be considered for Junos, but I don't even think they did it because they've been nominated like 3 times or something now, and they won once. And
they were
they might
nominated
even
this year as well.
were they nominated for this one too?
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So there you go.
And Voivod took it home, but Voivod.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. It still happens. I'm like, we took a break from the band for a while, and I'm really out of the loop since that point, because as soon as we did, like, I didn't have any reason to kind of keep on top of things. And I'm someone that kind of like, I use the internet for work purposes, but not really, I don't really dive into all that stuff. And I think now, especially since I didn't have to anymore, it was like a relief. Like, I don't want to look at any of these fucking websites anymore. Like, I don't want to follow all this shit anymore, So
I think one of the things
I'm really out of the loop about it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm hearing quite a bit from bands that they're active touring bands, always on the road, putting album out after album. It's important to build in some downtime for yourself, right? It's important to take a hiatus. You might not call it a hiatus, but it's important to take that time. You had a new child. Take some time to watch her grow a little bit. Build your studio, and I feel like that's the kind of thing that if you don't do that, then your output's going to get worse instead of better.
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. we didn't stop for that reason. Like, I don't think, I think the last album we put out is probably my favorite since Disgorge Mexico. So I think the reason we stopped was just burnout. And I know for myself, it personally wasn't fun anymore. And that probably, reflects and gets into like then other people, why it's not fun for other people, and when you're touring, at the level that we do or we did, it's stressful. No one's making money. Everyone's losing money. Even if a tour is profitable, which can be difficult once everything has to be paid for, you're still not going to work. So you're not making enough money. When you get home, you don't have any money, right? So there's all these things kind of add up. And, we did it for like 15 years of kind of like touring and playing as many shows as we possibly could. And yeah, it just kind of caught up to a point where it's like, it wasn't enjoyable in a way. And it was kind of like, why are we even doing this? Why are we here? At least that's kind of how I felt. So I just really needed to step back and think about it. And like, I had no idea, and no one, we never put out a press release or said anything like, oh, the band is taking a break or the band is ending or here's our last show. Like, we never did anything like that. The last show that Fuck the Facts actually played was in Italy. It was the last show for the album, the Desirable Rot album, and that was it. We just kind of like, all right, see you later. And it was only like about a year or so after that I got hung out with Phil again, and we're like, hey, you want to start jamming? But anyway, that's getting carried away. But really, it's just, I don't think it's because the music was suffering, because we didn't really have any reason to just put out albums to put out albums. We did the music stuff. The music part and the creation was genuinely, we loved doing that, and it was really good. I think it was all the other stuff surrounding it which made it difficult to sustain. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, you could say, oh, well, why didn't you just stop touring and keep putting out albums? But I think everything had just kind of been like contaminated. The whole idea of being in Fuck the Facts had been contaminated, that I just, when I looked at any part of it, I was like, I just don't want to do this. Like, because it all stressed me out. Like, I also booked all the tours, right? Like, we didn't have a manager, we didn't have a booking agent, we didn't even have a label. So, everything was like me waking up, and Mel doing a shit ton of stuff, and everyone kind of working really hard to make this thing go. It wasn't like there wasn't any label. Like no one cared if we toured or we didn't tour, we do it. We just kind of felt like we needed to keep this machine going, and it just got to a point where it was like, yeah, this just doesn't work for everyone's sanities. It kind of worked when everyone was like, young in their early 20s or still in their 20s, and it was like, now, okay, like everyone's in their 30s, and I'm getting to be 40, so like things change.
Did at any point did you ever just think about maybe I should just join someone else's band and let them do all the work?
Yeah, I thought about that. I don't think I can do that. I don't think it's part of my personality. I actually, I almost feel like a lot of the things that I get involved in, like even the venue that I started working for, and now I play a big role in managing the place and running the place, and it's just kind of part of my personality. I guess when I get invested in something, I tend to try and get in some sort of like leadership role. I don't know why, because it does feel like it would have been easier, but yeah, I don't think I could join. And I thought about that. And at this point in my life, where time is already like really tight, I'm just not interested in going and just kind of like, I do actually, with my neighbor sometimes, like he's got a little setup in his garage. I'll just go over there and jam. We'll have a couple of beers, but that's fine. But I don't want to commit to in trying to be in part of someone else's band. I just don't think it would be fair for them either, because I just wouldn't be able to follow through.
It would be your band in no time.
Yeah, but like, back in the day, I enjoyed it. Like when I was in Amon, that wasn't my band at all. I was just a bass player, but that was like, I had a blast, but I was also a very different person. Like I was a young kid. I love to party and do all that crazy stuff. Whereas now, I'm a full-on adult with responsibilities and kids. I don't have time to be hungover. I don't have time to like do all these other things, so it's a different life.
Cool. So you said that Fuck the Facts is starting to get active again.
Yeah.
So you're working on some material, and people can expect to hear some sounds at some point.
Stuff we've been working on for a year or so now. Like I said, like when we just stopped, and then everyone kind of just went about doing their normal lives, and everyone got invested. Actually, it helped me. I started working at the venue. I started becoming like a live sound guy, which was a lot of fun, and just kind of like having the financial stability. Like I was saying, like that was something I think that was very difficult for everyone to get around when we were touring. So once we had kind of figured out in our lives, Mel, who works at the museum, become like a full-time employee doing what she does. Vil had invested in a bar and started doing stuff like that. So we kind of like all had our lives more so settled, and it was just like, let's you want to just jam and see what happens, and if nothing happens, nothing happens, and if it does, then we'll see. And that's kind of just how the ball got rolling. And then as we started jamming again together, it just it felt right, and it felt like, yeah, let's we're writing songs, let's put them out, let's make an album. Why not?
Do you still have the current lineup, like the last album, or?
No, so now it's just me, Mel, and Vil. That's the lineup. So we are looking at playing some shows. Like we're playing a show in May. We're playing a festival in Montreal, and I got some friends to fill in on bass and the second guitar. But that's kind of, I think, the idea that we were gonna go for. I don't think I'm not looking for other members. Like the chemistry, obviously, with Mel. Like Mel and I have been together in a relationship now for 17 years. I've been jamming with Vil as the drummer for or jamming with Vil in the band for like 15 years. So there's something in that chemistry between the three of us, which is the lineup that we did Disgorge Mexico with, that just works. and we started jamming now, and it's the same like stupid jokes, and we're just kind of having fun with it. So and when we talk about what we might do with the band going forward, it's a very different creature than it was, before we stopped, where it was like the band was kind of like the most important thing, and everything else, like work and other stuff, and even family to an extent was kind of like put aside. When my first daughter was born, like we were touring like very shortly, as soon as we were able to. We were gone on like 5-week tours, and my daughter was very young with her grandparents. We were touring while Mel was like very pregnant, so we always kind of put everything aside, whereas now it's kind of like, well, if we're going to do this, it's got to be like something we enjoy doing. And everyone owns a house, everyone has like real responsibilities. We're not in a point in our lives where we can kind of just throw everything away and go on the road and play grindcore shows.
Just for those who are interested, there, if you were to do a YouTube search for pregnant singer grindcore, you'll see Mel.
Yeah,
it is amazing.
I know, it's
to watch.
That show in LA.
Yeah, the Roxy.
Yeah. Oh, that was such a horrible show. That show was such a fucking nightmare. I'll never forget it. Like it was part of the Scion. You remember Scion, obviously?
Yeah.
They used to do shows with metal bands, and they'd fly them out to places. And they did that. I don't remember which bands we were with. We were with a couple of other bands that didn't really sound anything like us. They were more like stoner rock bands or something. But anyway, yeah, they flew us out to, I think, a show in Columbus and Chicago and LA. And the show in LA, like that show at the Roxy, was just a fucking nightmare. It sounded so bad. And we were just kind of like treated really like shittily by the club. This club was like entirely empty. There was maybe, I don't know, like 20, 30 people there to see this show. And for like merchandise, they had literally given us what is probably the size of like, a small closet. No, that's even too big. It's like, maybe like 3 feet wide for all the bands to use in this entirely empty club.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was just that vibe of like, they just didn't want us to be there, but Scion was paying them money and they were just going to get it over with and get their check. And the show was horrible, but there's this video, I guess, of Mel mega pregnant. And that might have been the last dates that we did. Everything outside of the show was actually awesome, because like Scion put us up in hotels, and like we got like taken care of very well, and we had a lot of fun hanging out in LA. It's just the show itself wasn't fun.
Well, Topon, I don't want to. I mean, I seriously could talk to you for hours. We don't catch up often enough.
No, I know.
And
are you coming back to Ottawa anytime soon?
Well,
probably not.
You get a lot of good shows there at Mavericks. You just never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been back in quite a while, and I just don't know when or how it'll happen again. But I would definitely love to see you guys again. So
yeah, well, I hope to make it back out there at some point.
Yeah,
I'd love to travel again, even like just for fun.
There you go. Well, you always got a place to stay out here.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate your time.
And yeah, thank you. It's a lot of fun. Let's talk again sometime soon, even if it's not for a podcast.
Yes, please. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed that episode with Topon. And here now for you is Fuck the Facts off of their release Die Miserable, False Hope.